Okay, I guess we can start now. We've got some attendees. I guess some more people will be joining while I make all the introductions. Thank you everyone for coming to this eYCN online event during the European Chemistry Conference. eYCN is the European Young Chemists Network, and we are organizing this event to train young chemists in different soft skills. We had a couple of events this morning and this afternoon on ERC grants and getting funding, and then alternative careers. And now we're gonna have a whole event, a 1-hour event on science communication and science outreach. So we've got 4 fantastic speakers today from all around Europe. So we've got, first we're gonna have Jess Wade, who's a postdoc researcher at Imperial College in London, where she studies chirality and light, but she's also a very, very good advocate for science communication, and in particular, the promotion of diversity in STEM, in sciences and technology. And among other things, she's written, I don't know, like 1,000 Wikipedia entries about underrepresented scientists and communities. And today she'll talk about that. Then we've got Laura, who studied chemistry in Oxford, and then she moved to the RSC in Cambridge, where she learned a lot about science writing and journalism, first in education in chemistry, then chemistry world. After that, I think she moved to Germany to work in ENBL, where she worked also in science communication and social media. And since 2018, she's the European correspondent for C&EN, which, as you may know, is the weekly science journalism magazine from the American Chemical Society. Then we're gonna have Laia Pelleja, who studied chemistry in Spain and then Germany, then moved to industry for a while to work in, I think, what used to be Bayer, but now it's Covestro. And then she moved back to Spain and carried out her PhD studies in nanotechnology and solar cells. And after that, completely changed gears and started devoting her life to science outreach. And currently she's the outreach manager at one of the main chemistry centers in Spain, ICIQ in Tarragona. And then finally, we're gonna have Sara Tortorella, who's a chemist working in a mass spectrometry company called Molecular Horizon. Since her uni time, she's done a lot of promoting and organizing scientific dissemination activities, particularly events for youngsters, for young people. She collaborates with a lot of national and international partners, funding agencies, nonprofits, and she'll give a lot of tips and tricks on how to create a good scientific presentation for different publics. So now I'm gonna just hand the mic to Jess. So Jess, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much. You have to stop sharing for me to be able to start. Such is Zoom. Awesome. We've passed the first test. Now I have to share the right screen. And now let's see if by magic. Awesome. Everyone can see it. Nod. Fernando. Awesome. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a privilege to join all of these amazing speakers and such a great audience. I'm a big fan of everyone speaking, so you're really, really lucky to have everyone here today. As Fernando mentioned in the beginning, I work at Imperial College London, where I look at new materials for electronic devices. Particularly, I'm interested in carbon-based semiconductors, so organic semiconductors, creating kind of cool structures out of them, taking lots of beautiful photographs of these cool structures, and then putting them into electronic devices. So putting them into things, just trying to make my zoom smaller, putting them into things like flexible displays or the screen of your iPhone. And as Fernando said, I'm really excited by chiral materials, and I'm happy to discuss that at length with anyone who wants to have a chat about it on Twitter or elsewhere. So today I thought I'd try, in my tiny, tiny amount of time, to discuss kind of 3 important things I've been thinking about in science communication, and particularly our roles as scientists in doing that communication. The first one, Fernando already spilled the beans. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I've been doing on Wikipedia. The second one, I wanted to talk about Twitter, because it's certainly been really, really important for me as a scientist. And I think that we're seeing really exciting and creative ways that scientists and science communicators use Twitter. And then finally, about awards. If I don't have enough time to talk about awards, that's fine. We can go into it in the questions afterwards. But these are my kind of 3 things that I want to try and cover. I had been thinking about diversity in science for a long time, and particularly women's representation in physics and chemistry in senior positions. And I'd been kind of doing, small amounts of outreach and going into schools and, thinking I was changing the world and not actually changing the world. And then in 2017, I read this phenomenal book by an author called Angela Saini. It's called Inferior: The True Power of Women in the Science That Shows It. And in this book, Angela, who is an engineer, trained as an engineer and now an award-winning science writer, does a kind of forensic investigation into the origins of the stereotypes that perpetuate that women are inferior to men, intellectually inferior, morally superior apparently, but intellectually inferior. And this book taught me so much. It taught me so much about bias in science, and it taught me so much about how women's voices had been systematically silenced for decades, if not centuries. And it really got me thinking about how we better represent and celebrate all of the great voices we have working in science. So the women, the people of color, the people with disabilities, the LGBTQ+ scientists, the scientists we so often overlook in favor of celebrating old white men. I seem to say old white men a lot in my life, a lot more than I thought I would as a physicist. And we see this manifest. There was a report just last year looking at the GCSE science curriculum. So this is the national exam taken by UK school children at the age of 15 or 16, which, as you can imagine, recently has been completely changed by coronavirus, but not a single woman was named in the entire GCSE science curriculum. And if you think about that, that's physics, chemistry, and biology. There's an awful lot of women who could be mentioned, but no, they do not. A big study of American textbooks recently found that there were no Black women featured at all in US textbooks. So we do a really, really bad job of representing and celebrating women. But when we do it, it can work phenomenally well. So I'm sure you all saw this phenomenal film, Hidden Figures. This film had a massive, massive impact, far beyond, I think, 21st Century Fox anticipated when they started making it. I mean, it had a cool soundtrack and it was beautifully made. But the story of these women, the African-American computers of NASA, went on to completely transform so many young women's lives, so many young aspiring engineers, aerospace engineers, physicists, mathematicians watched this film and were excited. I think something quite similar happened a while ago with CSI. The number of people applying to study forensic science after CSI was on television massively increased. And Hidden Figures has done this for engineering. So when we get it right, when we put these role models in media that the general public consume, it really, really works. So we really need to do a better job of that. Around this time, Hidden Figures came out. I read Inferior. I was like, oh, I need to do something. And I learned about Wikipedia. And I learned about it from a phenomenal woman called Dr. Alice White, who is a historian of science at the Wellcome Trust. And Alice taught me about all the different weird and wonderful ways Wikipedia is important, ways that I hadn't really appreciated. So it's really important in the media. It's crucial when journalists are about to discuss something on television or are writing an article on something. They don't have time to delve into the technical peer-reviewed paper. So they go to the Wikipedia page just to read the kind of punchy summary. But they also use Wikipedia when they're programming and they're booking their experts to come on. So people are much more likely to appear on television or radio if they've got a Wikipedia page. It's also used a lot in education, and a lot more so now because everyone's homeschooling and people don't have access to the books that they had before. Wikipedia has become this phenomenally important platform. Actually, for medicine, for medical education, all the medical content on Wikipedia is peer reviewed by other medics, which is just incredible, incredibly quickly. And the medical content can all be downloaded as part of a project called Wiki Project Medicine, where you can get access to all of it offline for people in the developing world who don't have access to textbooks. So education, the media, hugely important, but also fascinatingly, really important in science. So there was a big study led by a team at MIT a couple of years ago, where a professor assigned niche areas of chemistry, emerging interdisciplinary areas of chemistry to his class to write about for Wikipedia. So aspects of chemistry which didn't have Wikipedia pages. They then tracked the prevalence of those pages in peer-reviewed journals, the prevalence of those topics, in peer-reviewed journals, how often they came up and the phrases that were used. And they found that they could assign 1 in 300 actual real-life science words, science papers, to them being on Wikipedia. So hugely important. And it's important in invisible ways too. It's important in how it programs everything on your Home Assistant. If you've ever asked Siri a question or Amazon Alexa a question, the place that they've gone to for answers is Wikipedia, which is kind of fascinating. It's also important at the moment massively in issues like coronavirus and the strike for Black Lives, in maintaining a non-partisan, up-to-date, local, all the different languages have different versions of Wikipedia, place that people can go to for trust for news. So what matters, what's on Wikipedia really, really matters. And in general, we think that what matters is on Wikipedia, right? Certainly I did until 2017. And then I found out that women are massively underrepresented on Wikipedia. On English language Wikipedia, as of this morning, women represent 18.6% of the biographies. English language is the biggest language on Wikipedia, but if you're interested in checking out your own language, if you go to this URL in the top left, and of course these are recorded and I'll share the slides afterwards, you can have a really great time looking at particular disciplines, particular languages, year of birth, whatever, you name it, you can collect the stats. But women representing less than 1 in 5 of the Wikipedia biographies, I don't know, it really upset and infuriated me when I learned that statistic. So since the beginning of 2018, I've been writing these Wikipedia pages every single day. It has become an incredible journey where I've learned so many amazing stories and also absolutely inspirational and exciting science. Fernando didn't know how many I've written, but I have just written 1,109. I should have done an extra one last night, so it was a nicer number, but I'm really sorry. Got to be honest with you all. So these people are just absolutely amazing. And the way it has inspired me and inspired other people to start writing and translating pages is incredible as well. They have the most incredible stories. I'll tell you about 2 of them before I get to just briefly talking about Twitter. This is Gladys West. She is an African-American mathematician who was born in Virginia in the 1930s. So she's almost 90, if not 90 this year. And when I wrote her page, I had very little information on her. I knew that she was African-American. I knew that she was born in Virginia. I knew that she studied maths at a time that not many women studied maths, went to college when not many African-American women went to college at all. She ended up working for the US government. And this is a picture of the kind of information I could get at the beginning. I can put a laser pointer on. So this was all that I could capture at the beginning, and all of the information about her was redacted. And as I said, I had been so inspired by Hidden Figures. I was like, oh, it's like Hidden Figures. I've discovered a new hidden figure. And then as I've had this page online, it's just steadily grown. It's just incredible. So she was nominated in 2018 and 2019 for the BBC's Top 100 Women, which means that she now goes front and center on the BBC homepage. So the page views go from, a couple of hundred, a couple of thousand a day to tens of thousands of people looking at Gladys West's page. She then got inducted into the US Air Force Hall of Fame. So now we get all of these beautiful, incredible photographs of her, like the one in her profile picture now, because the US government give them all for free for anyone who wants to use images. They give the licenses away for free. So Gladys West is one just absolutely incredible story. Another one that I just thought was pertinent for the moment is Sarah Gilbert, who is one of the Oxford vaccinologists who's working on the coronavirus vaccine. And the amazing thing about Sarah Gilbert's page is if you look at it and you can see the various translations of it and then go to the page views, You can track what's happening in public, in the media. So you can see in the news when Sarah Gilbert's got really hot and important. So you can see when in July, on July 20th, when the Oxford vaccine triggered an immune response, suddenly 5,000 people a day were going to her page. This is when we announced phase 2 clinical trials, up here somewhere around phase 3. So you can get this really interesting information when science has become something trendy and something important, you know, front and center, you can capture that. So I think Wikipedia is an amazing tool for science communication. And the most beautiful aspect of it is anyone of any age can edit. You can set up an editing group with your research group. You can put it together as part of a university training program, and you can even do it with school kids. And school kids love editing Wikipedia. There's some kind of rush they get when they think they can get home and show their parents a page that they wrote that's on the real life internet, which I think is so fantastic. It also costs absolutely no money. So it costs nothing to edit Wikipedia. And that's something that I think is really, really crucial. I'm going to speak very briefly about Twitter, and then we'll talk really quickly about awards in the section afterwards if we have time. There's the Twitter logo to remind me to talk to you about Twitter. So Twitter has been really important to me as a scientist, as an early career scientist, and I was thinking about why as I put together these slides. And I think it's because it completely takes away the hierarchies that we're, you know, very much at the bottom of as an early career scientist. It lets you talk to so many different people, to professors, to journal editors, to science writers like everyone on this call, to PhD researchers in different countries and different time zones. And I think that's something that's been really, really crucial and exciting for this generation of young scientists. It also lets you reach a really broad audience. So when you think about the people who follow you on Twitter, some of them are scientists. Some of them are parents of kids who are thinking about doing science. So many of them are teachers who are looking for inspirational new things to include in their lessons. And some of them may even be, as I mentioned, your professors or members of staff. I think what's great about Twitter compared to Wikipedia is that it's very much a two-way discussion. We've had a big kind of hoo-ha and drama in the UK recently around exam results. And I've had so many fascinating Twitter conversations with young people who've been impacted by that. It gives us a really, really great opportunity to increase trust in science and in scientists. And I particularly think, as young chemists that you all are, the chemistry community on Twitter is really, really awesome. And I think you're very excited. You should be very excited and lucky to enter that. I'm going to end in 2 slides, I promise. Fernando's looking at me like, hurry up, Jess, hurry up. Something I think that's really exciting. I'm going to give 2 examples of ways I think Twitter has been used in a cool and innovative way to bring together a community. Stuart Cantrell, who is the editor of Nature, who is incredibly friendly and lovely on Twitter, who you can all have a chat to, has been running these social isolation socials. And you can go to the hashtag social isolation social if you want to see who's been involved. But he brings together people from all over the world, scientists of all different ages, of all different backgrounds, of all different disciplines, I mean, with a focus on chemistry, just to have a chat. And it completely takes down any of those barriers that you may have felt and been nervous to talk to an editor, been nervous to talk to a professor, been nervous to talk to someone who's going to go and write a really great article on it. So I think this is a really fantastic example of using social media in a really, really positive and exciting way. Another one to end on is all of the phenomenal weeks that have happened recently. So kind of following the awful events that have happened in America, a group of Black scientists have come together and put on a series of entirely online virtual social media, mainly Twitter-based events. It started with Black Birders Week in May, where all of Black birders and naturalists, they call themselves, who wanted to connect with people all over the world, started putting up their profiles and talking and getting huge amounts of publicity. There's been Black in Chemistry Week, Black in Neuro Week, and Black in Engineering Week is on now. So I think there are really productive and beautiful ways to use social media to convey who you are as a scientist, to develop your own scientific career and your confidence in speaking and in writing, but also in amplifying the voices of all of these incredible researchers who may not have the platform that you do. And so, yeah, social media, massively important. I think I should end there before I take up anyone else's time. If you're interested in anything that I said, or if you just want to have a chat, you can find me on Twitter, as I mentioned, important thing for me, or you can find me on my email, and I'm always happy to talk about it. The book that I mentioned was Angela Saine's Inferior, The True Power of Women and the Science That Shows It. Her subsequent book, Superior, The Return of Race Science, is also absolutely phenomenal. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to one of the other much more distinguished speakers. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the discussion. Now I need to work out how to stop sharing.
Thank you, Jess. You brought up a very interesting point that I forgot to bring up before, is that if anybody has questions, just write those down in the chat, and then we'll address those at the end. We'll have a discussion with the 4 speakers. We do have a comment before we move to Laura. Someone called Sladana Savic from Serbia, I guess. She says, yes, you were really inspiring. I think we can all find a woman in our own country that is mentioned on Wikipedia, thanks to you, among other people. So, and I know some colleagues that may be interested in being involved to adding more people from Serbia to Wikipedia. So I would encourage Sladana to maybe get in touch with Jess through Twitter and get onto that amazing task. I'll be also glad to see more Serbian female chemists on Wikipedia. And now we're gonna move to Laura, who again is a science journalist working for Chemical Engineering News at the ACS, and she's gonna talk about the importance of science journalism for scientists and for like the public. So thank you, Laura, for joining us.
Cool. So I hope I'm sharing my screen. Are you seeing the presentation? Cool. So thank you again to the organisers for inviting me. I was really looking forward to coming to Lisbon and participating in the full UCHEMS Congress there, but we will have to delay that for a couple of years. But this is a really good alternative, and I'm really glad to be here. I'm also very honoured to share the stage with the other speakers. Jess does herself down, but all of them are incredibly admirable and do incredible work. So I would just like to say thank you. So today I don't have as many slides as Jess, but the ones I have are organised almost like the important things of a story. Those some of the most important questions that you will always ask in pretty much anything, but especially in journalism, is who, what, where, and how. And so those are the questions that I'm going to try and answer in my kind of 15 minutes. And that includes who I am and how I got started as an example, but also how I define science journalism and why I think it's important, and then what you can do. And that's whether you want to do a career change or try science journalism, or if you just want to look at being involved in promoting your science or being a voice, which is also an incredibly important thing to be doing. So Fernando introduced me really in a really lovely way earlier today. I would just say my name is Laura. So I'm British, you can tell. I live in Germany. So the pronunciation of my name sometimes is a little bit awkward. So I say Laura, not Laura, and my surname is pronounced Howes. But I am not precious about it. I use she, her pronouns. And I originally studied chemistry. And then, as Fernando said, I started to move slowly, kind of in a kind of iterative way towards writing and journalism. The way I did that was starting at the Royal Society of Chemistry, actually as a journal editor originally. So I went into their publishing graduate scheme, and they gave opportunities for people to write and to try. And it was that kind of way of finding something I liked and trying it, and then finding something I liked and trying it again. And I kind of moved across. I moved to Germany in 2013, where I worked at EMBL, first writing and editing a sort of journal magazine for science teachers in Europe, and then doing their social media for EMBL for a few years. And then I got the amazing opportunity to write for C&EN. So I was doing home office or working from home before even we all had to work from home. This has been my office for the last 2 years. But a lot of my work is to do with science in Europe and biological chemistry in particular. So I would say that my career path is not the only career path, and it is not the normal career path, because I don't think there is a normal career path for science journalists. And I think that's really important if you're thinking about doing this or intrigued by it. The best thing you can do is talk to multiple people and see what they do and what they advise, because how I got into it will not be the same as other people. And I think that's also true that we do journalism in different ways. I predominantly write, although I do get the opportunity to make some videos or do some podcasting. Other people might be working for broadcasters, or they might do podcasts more regularly, or they might even use new media. There's all sorts of different ways that you can share what's going on. I would also say that we're probably not a truly diverse or representative field. I'm getting to know a lot more of the international science writers, so not just the English language science writers and journalists, but I still think we're perhaps sometimes overly white, overly English as a first language in English media, and I think we could probably do more, not only to make sure we represent a diverse amount of science, but that we represent a diversity within ourselves. And so I just wanted to kind of underline that. So I guess the what point is the one that I really wanted to start focusing on, because I could have spoken about science writing, and a lot of people do science writing. I call myself a science journalist, and I think that's an important distinction, because you can do science writing or you can do science journalism. And maybe there isn't a clear-cut distinction, but for me, it's about doing journalism about science, and that's a really kind of circular argument. Science journalism is journalism about science. But if you think about it, there are some things that are very definitely journalism, and there are some things that are definitely not. I think the things that I find important are that journalism, and therefore science journalism, should be impartial and ethical, and it should have context. And I don't think so much that it matters about the medium, which is why I didn't want to talk about science writing. I wanted to talk about science journalism. I also think it's incredibly important, especially at the moment where things are changing every day relating to coronavirus, to health and recommendations and understanding what's going on. Science changes, and we need to be able to communicate that. These days, there are a lot of different ways to communicate what is going on, but journalism is not about what people want to say, it's about what people want to know. It's about being responsible to your readers or your viewers. It's about being responsible to your audience. So I think that's the part where I think sometimes people can find that a bit confusing, but I am responsible to the readers of C&EN. Those are the people I work for, or I like to think that I work for. That means that I am responsible also to the people I interview. I need to be ethical and I need to treat them well, but I need to make sure that I am really making sure that I do the best for the readers. I am presenting something, and I present something that I care about as well. One of the coolest things I think about science journalism is getting to learn so much and getting a really privileged position. I get to talk to people about their science, I get to talk to people about what's going on, and then I get to try and kind of convey it to other people. And the why is I've already kind of touched on, but it's because it's needed and it's because you care. I think sometimes we forget that science is done by people, and it's done by people, it's funded by people, it's part of society. And if we're going to care about that, and we should do, then we should also have proper journalistic inquiry about it. And that's at all levels. I write for C&EN, so my readers are people like you. They are scientists or scientifically interested people. They are going to care about very similar things to most people, but they might have a slightly different point of view, or they might have a slightly different set of expertises, which means that maybe we can go deeper. It also means that if I'm writing about a scientific paper, I can assume a certain amount of knowledge. But all journalism is about providing people, providing citizens with the information they need to make decisions about their lives, about their communities, about their societies, about their governments. And that includes science. But the most important thing about a story is that it is important and that it is interesting. And that can be the topic, and it is also down to the journalist. And it is the journalist's role to find those stories and to convey them and show people why they should care. And that comes to how we do it. This is a quote from a book called The Elements of Journalism, which is that the first task of a journalist is to verify what information is reliable and to order it so people can grasp it. So this is what I was saying, that my job is to try and take information and convey it. And that's what everyone is trying to do, I think, here, just in different ways and in different mediums. So on a day-to-day basis, what a lot of my job is not actually writing. What a lot of my job is reading, thinking, talking to people, seeing what other conversations are going on, sometimes just networking. So on a day-to-day basis, I will get up in the morning, I will make myself a cup of coffee because I can't operate without coffee. And then as I'm having breakfast, I'll be maybe checking my emails or Twitter, scrolling through, seeing what people were discussing overnight, or what kind of things are going on. I obviously work for an American organization, so a lot of discussions within the newsroom happen on Slack while I'm asleep. So I might, be checking in what the progress of stories are. I also will look at RSS feeds, so journal feeds, to see what has been published. I'm lucky in that I have access to journal articles sometimes before they are published. So sometimes I get sort of sneak previews a few days before. So those would usually be in my emails, and I'll be scanning through the papers and seeing what's going on. So when I say papers here, I'm mainly talking about scientific papers, research papers. Anything I think is interesting or I want to follow up on, either from the scientific literature or if something is happening in the public domain, I claim it. So I will send a quick kind of note to my colleagues so that we don't double up and work on things, but also then we know what each other is working on. We might have a way of helping. And then it's a case of emailing or phoning sources and interviewees and trying to find more things out. So for example, the other week, there was a terrible, terrible explosion in Beirut. And one of the interesting things that happened with that was that we realized that chemists were on Twitter discussing what could have caused this explosion. And so I popped a note to my editor and said, has anyone covering this? There's discussion going on. Shall I follow it up? And then I started to have conversations with people just off the record or following up what people were talking about on Twitter. It came out what the cause of this explosion was, which was poorly stored ammonium nitrate. I mean, Fernando knows this because he also wrote about this at the time. And so then it was a case of trying to put the context into what happened. Why did it explode? Why did this compound explode? Phoning up, or actually Skyping in the end, Andrea Sella, who's a chemist, and talking to him briefly to make sure both that I understood everything that I'd read. So we did like a fact check. And then he also explained some extra things to me so that I could have some extra context for my article. That then gets written up. I draft it, I edit it, I draft, I edit, I send it for editing. We do we check, we get multiple edits, and it goes online. That's kind of how a day would work. I'm conscious of the time, but I don't have very much more, I promise. If you want more examples, and I think they're really useful, there is a website called the Open Notebook, and they have a whole set of profiles called Day in the Life, and that will show you people across scientific disciplines, career levels, countries, and how they work. And I would very much recommend that you watch that, or read that rather. So if you want to do it yourself, if you want to try to be a science journalist, or you would like to do a little bit, or see if it's something that would work for you, the best thing I can recommend first of all is to essentially, review what's going on. So just like if you are going to go into a new area of research, you would do a literature review and you would explore the field. Explore the field here. Read, join organizations, attend conferences. At the moment, you're not going to be doing that in person, perhaps, but there are a lot of national and international organizations for science writers and science journalists. I've got in a couple of slides, I've got some names of some of those, but if you search for them, you'll find a lot of online material or profiles, descriptions of how people do it. You can get some training if you want. If you're still at a university, very often there might be somebody there who either it's formal training, or you could speak to your press office and see if they do some science writing training, if they would offer that to you, or if you could go and do internship. There are full postgraduate degrees that you can do. You can also just write for a student newspaper, try it out that way, see about that. You could set up your own blog, roll up your sleeves, write, film, record. These are the most important things. If you want to participate as a scientist, Jess was really clear that sometimes journalists can't see everything. We can't. Think about pitching your science. If you have a paper or something you think is interesting, or if you think that you have a unique point of view, pitch your science, reach out to somebody, but work out what the story is, not the topic. We need it to be you can't just say, oh, I'm really interested in forming novel carbon-carbon bonds. That doesn't tell me anything. But if you can say, oh, we're, this particular sort of bond forming reaction has been taken 6 years of my life, and before that nobody thought they could do it. Well, that's a story. So story versus topic. And think like a reporter. If you're going to be interviewed, think about what questions we might ask. And this is my final slide. There's a couple of references of some people, some online resources you might be able to look up. So the Open Notebook I mentioned before. There are also journalism programs at, say, MIT. They have a lot of resources online. The World Federation of Science Journalists is an overarching organization. There are then different organizations in different countries that are members of this World Federation. So there's a lot of different resources that you might want to look up. And I'm very sorry because I know I went slightly over time and I was convinced I wouldn't. I'm so sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much, Laura. Now we're gonna move to the next speaker. That's Laia Pelleja from ICIQ in Tarragona. So the floor is yours, Laia.
It's okay? Can you hear me? One moment, please. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Fernando, for your kind introduction and the organizing committee for inviting me. It's a great pleasure sharing this session about science communication with these three amazing women. Please, I close the cam because otherwise the connection will be weaker. Fernando, if something goes wrong, just phone me, please. Don't let me talk alone without audience, please. Okay, as you know, my name is Laia Pelleja, and I usually work in this building in Tarragona. We are 6 people in the communication and image unit, and I am the outreach manager. Now we should be together in Lisbon, meeting each other, making friends, learning a lot, but we are not. So I am at home. Oh, it doesn't work, please. Next. In this little village called La Juncosa del Montmell in Catalonia, trying to work with 3 kids at home, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a very poor internet connection. So I apologize if at some point the connection doesn't work properly. I hope that this situation ends soon and that you and your loved ones are healthy. Oh, why it doesn't work? Now. Let's start. ICIQ is a dynamic research institute. Over 300 people work here, half of them coming from all corners of the globe. And our research focuses on catalysis, renewable energies, and CO2 conversion. ICIQ scientific facilities are extraordinary. And on top of that, we also have research support laboratories that are run by scientists committed to education and outreach. And this is very important for me and for the science outreach in the institute. We have 4 pillars. The first one is research. As already mentioned, is focusing on catalysis and renewable energy. We have also knowledge and technology transfer. We also have a very active training program for scientists and support staff. And finally, outreach is ICIQ's 4th pillar, which I have been leading for the last 6 years. On today's talk, I'd like to give you a glimpse into our scientific outreach activities. We divide them depending on the public. Kids, high school students, undergraduates, teachers, and general public. Let's start by going through the activities focused on kids. We believe it's extremely important to promote scientific education and awaken scientific curiosity or vocation at these early ages. Having a scientific vocation doesn't mean to become a scientist, but having a critical while positive outlook on life. Let's say having a scientific pose more than anything else. During the Week of Science organized every year in our country, we organize workshops called Chemistry with Families. The kids come to a research center with their families, put on protective goggles and become scientists for a couple of hours, and they were very happy. ICIQ researchers visit schools in Tarragona to bring chemistry closer to the students. As you can see, children in primary school enjoy a morning full of experiments, and in this picture you can see all the soaps that we prepare once. The Science of Chocolate project focuses on raising girls' interest in science. All these seminars are delivered by female researchers who are currently carrying out leading research at ICIQ or our neighbor, the Rovira i Virgili University here in Tarragona. We think that both the research they carry out and their life experience are important to become reference for the children. At the ICIQ Chemistry Summer Camp, we offer two courses. The first one is Femquímica, Let's Do Chemistry in English. In this course, the children have an introduction to chemistry through experiments that help understand our daily life from a chemical perspective. And the other one is called M'agrada la recerca, I like research, where students learn different laboratory techniques and see the potential of chemistry to improve the world. Every summer, 40 kids participate in this program, and the last day, during the closing ceremony, the kids have the chance to explain what they have learned to their parents, and they were very, very, very happy. We also have two platforms for kids. The first one is the ICIQ Virtual Lab, which is full of content that can be used either at home or at school, and an interactive game about artificial photosynthesis. You can find all these platforms in our webpage. Let's move now to the high school students. eYCN has a learning laboratory, especially designed and equipped to do outreach activities. Every week, high school students are welcome to visit our facilities to learn more about who we are and what we do. We organize an interactive tour in which students participate in one of our experimental workshops. We have 9 different workshops. Every year we have new ones, but now we have 9. Most of the information available on this is on Catalan and Spanish, but if anyone needs further information, I will share my email address at the end of the talk, okay? In Catalonia, high school students need to work on a research project, so we invite them to carry out the experimental part with us. So far, they have worked in several projects involving, for example, quantum dots, like Jess Wade making in her lab, water splitting, or dye-sensitized solar cells. For several years, eYCN has taken part in the Youth and Science program, and this program from the Fundació Catalunya La Pedrera brings together a group of high school students and researchers from research institutions, and for 2 weeks they gather in the Catalan Pyrenees to learn and work on different research projects. eYCN has offered workshops on chemistry reactions and on how to build an organic solar cell. This program also offers stays in one of the research centers taking part in this program. Every summer, eYCN hosts at least 2 students from this program in one of its research laboratories to carry out different research projects. In collaboration with Catalunya La Pedrera Foundation, we also participate in the Crazy About Science program. Our course is called Crazy About Chemistry, and it's a year-long workshop in chemistry for high school students organized by us. It is targeted at students in their first year of high school with a special interest and talent in chemistry, basically, and research, who want to expand their scientific knowledge through hands-on experiments in a prestigious research center. This program has been running for 7 years, and it's the apple of my eye, let's say. Spending our Saturdays together, a great connection is created with the students, which allows me to keep in touch with them through the years, which leads to mentoring work as well. At this point, I'd like to mention Professor Kilian Muñiz. He gave his last scientific talk on the 7th of March to the Crazy About Chemistry 2020 class. As always, the way he conducted the session was extraordinary and stimulated a great dialogue with the students. So Kilian, rest in peace. The Barcelona International Youth Science Challenge is an international scientific challenge event that aims to connect the most passionate science students over the world with the best researchers. This program was created also by the Fundació Catalunya La Pedrera, and eYCN offers the research project entitled Artificial Photosynthesis. In this 2 or 3 week-long workshop, 8 or 10 participants learn how to mimic the natural photosynthesis process in the lab to discover different ways to use and store the solar energy. Now, moving on to undergraduates, 10 outstanding undergraduate students with a background in chemistry or related studies are welcome to spend a 3-month paid internship in one of eYCN's research groups during July, August, and September. It's also important to remark here that a fair number of these students end up coming back to eYCN to pursue their doctoral studies. Although we believe science is everywhere, one of its most important entry points is school classroom, as we all know. So we have created a program aimed at school teachers. Our workshops are designed to provide teachers with educational material and assistance to bridge the gap between research and school. All workshops combine theory and laboratory practices. And now I see that I look so young on this picture. Science fairs. Science fairs are a good platform to reach all kinds of audiences, especially kids and youth. Throughout the years, ICIQ has participated in many fairs with different workshops intended to showcase chemical reactions easy to perform at home. Experiments are really useful to understand basic chemistry concepts. And the idea of performing an experiment inspires something very important for any kind of audience. I would say it means I can do it and I can help to do it. This is our philosophy when we decide to participate in science fairs. And here you can see today's moderator, Dr. Fernando Gomollón. He's always been a very good friend. Finally, the science talks in amazing places and with different formats, round tables, radio broadcasts, etc. As you can see, there is no dull moment in outreach. You meet interesting people and learn new things every day, I promise. I've said the best for last. Our greatest achievement is the community we have created with the outreach students. Over 150 alumni have spent a year with us. They are always eager to come back and help us run workshops or any other outreach activities. It's a good way to keep in touch and keep on learning. Every year we gather so the different classes can meet. Our outreach alumni are following very different studies. For example, Adam is a physical and mathematical engineer. Andrea is also a physical engineer. Fernando is in an aerospace engineer. Elena wants to be a doctor. And of course, most of them end up studying chemistry normally. All of this wouldn't be possible without ICIQ support and the energy of people deeply committed to outreach. My most sincere thanks to all of them. They are very good science communicators and very good friends. And to you for listening to my talk. In case you would like to get in touch with me, you can do it through Twitter or email. If you have any doubts, don't hesitate to contact me. And if you want to tell me that I wasn't alone during these slides, it's also very welcome. This picture is from just last year. If you ever come to Tarragona, don't miss the chance to see teamwork as its best and come to see some castells, please. Thank you very much and kisses to everyone.
Thank you again, Laia, for your great presentation. Again, everybody, if you want to drop any questions for the speakers, they're going to stay here with us after the talks. So just go to the Q&A option on Zoom and write them down there. And now it's a pleasure for me to introduce the last speaker of this science communication session. It's Sara Tortorella. She's going to speak about how to craft a perfect PowerPoint presentation about science for non-scientists, I guess, but I mean, all the tips are probably useful for scientific presentations themselves. So yeah, just the floor is yours, Sara. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Fernando, and to all of the organizers. Also, compliments to this beautiful e-conference. I've been attending a few sessions also from this morning, so it was really a pleasure. These 15 minutes are going to be about tips and tools for designing effective scientific presentation. I have to apologize, Fernando, it will be mainly for the traditional audience we may have in scientific conferences, okay? But still, I think that we will learn something that will be useful everywhere we will present something. So with me, I was already introduced by Fernando. I live in Perugia, which is in the center of Italy, as you see, and I'm a chemist. I also work in science communication, mainly organizing activities, outreach and communication activities. But the main point is that, as you see from my background, is that I am a scientist, so I have no idea, no background in a design or a graphics. So why am I here to talk to you about designing cool scientific presentation? Well, the answer is because, and I think I share my background with many of you listening, is because we as scientists, we tend to travel a lot, we tend to know a lot of people, we tend to understand different ways of communicating science and carrying out science. Okay, in my case, I was lucky enough to travel a lot during my studies, both in companies and in universities. And this is where I learned these 3 rules that I want to start with, and maybe we can also finish with somehow, because these are really the pillars we have to bring in mind. First of all, listen. We are not expert in public speaking, but all of us, we are all expert at listening to talks. Okay, I assume every one of us as a scientist attended many conferences, and I am sure any of you can pick the best or his or her favorite presentation, as well as his or her worst presentation ever attended. Okay, so the first rule is just listen and try to understand what you like from what you don't like. Second, it's cool because we are scientists, so we like to study. Also, design has its rules. Likely they have been already written, so we just have to study, okay? And this is how somehow I was able to compile this presentation for you as well. I studied those rules. This is a good news, right? Then the third one, this was told by a good friend of mine who is a designer. This rule is really important. So copy. When it comes to designing presentation or whatever in the design community, copy, always. You will never get the same results anyway. In this case, we even can get worse results, but just copy, okay? So these are the instructions for you, so we will have to keep in mind. And then I will briefly show some epic fails that I think any of us at least saw once in his or her life as a scientific, in the scientific community. So the points I will focus on, but please stop me if I run late, are really thought to be the thing you have to bring in mind to be able to design a really nice presentation, okay? Only following these 5 simple concepts, okay? So what about the font? Font is everything. It's written on your slide. You may be aware or not that there are 2 kind of families for fonts, serif and sans serif. I will be short here because I don't want to bore you, but for a presentation that are thought to be on screen, you want to use sans serif font. You have here some examples. Why is that? Again, design has its rules. So someone studied, like I did a PhD in chemometrics, someone did a PhD in Helvetica. Okay, so we have to, thanks to them, the understanding and the knowledge about how our brain reads stuff, okay? So just be careful because some of the default fonts that we have in Word, PowerPoint, whatever, are kind of wrong. So maybe they are serif because they are intended to be on books, okay, to be printed. But if you want to present in a screen, you want to use serif font. Also, how to write. So writing in capital, it's not really great. Even writing just the first letter in capital, it's not that great too. And always concerning the text, we don't want to fill the entire slide with text, okay? This also comes to a point that we will touch together, which is you don't need to read your slides. It's bad, okay? Especially if you are like this, when you present and you are just not looking at the people. So you don't want to read your slide. So avoid to fill them with text. The general rule is that the more empty space you leave in your slide, the more focus you can have from your audience, and most importantly, you will be sure on what your audience is focusing on if you put few elements on your slide, okay? And this is really important. Another rule that we will see repeating in this presentation is borrowed from the design community again: less is more, okay? Bring this in mind. Colors, I will be fast. You can use dark letters on a light background, or a light or yellow letters on a dark background. How to choose which one? If you are going to teach, or if you are in small rooms, a white background is fine. If you have bigger rooms and wider audience, dark backgrounds are preferred, okay? Also depends on what's the scientific topic you work with. For instance, I work a lot with images, and it's really good to have dark backgrounds when you are going to display images, okay? Also in this case, the general rule is to use high contrast, but fortunately you can find already a table that rationalize which pairs you want to choose or to completely avoid. Again, use high contrast, please. This was a slide I photographed in a conference, and it's not because it's far. It was just, and it was from a keynote. I was so pissed off about a keynote presenting this slide. I'm sure the science was great, but I mean, this is a message that I want to convey, especially to young researchers. We have no excuse anymore, okay? We have all the tools to design nice presentation from a design point of view, and we have to do that, okay? We need to use colors that match. This is called palette in the technical language, but also in this way, don't worry, because I can see many of you maybe thinking, oh no, I don't understand anything about colors. I cannot distinguish dark green from green. Don't worry. The palettes and the color schemes are already available in the web, in your template, the PowerPoint, and in other tools that I'm going to show you in a second, okay? For instance, in R, this is a plot you can do in R, the default colors are already okay. Okay, the default palette, it's already okay. So you don't really need to invent a lot of things. But just bring in mind that there are some colors that are good together and then some colors that are not good together. We talk about font, we talk about colors. There's no need to really take down notes. It's good to know this concept, but as simple as it is, there are already templates available, and I can recommend many websites. I just put this one because time reasoning, which is Slides Carnival, which I like a lot. And if you Google it and you will have a look, I'm sure you will find presentation that you will like, template presentation that you will like, and that you can easily adapt to your scientific presentation. Now let's get to the core of maybe what we are more interested on, since we are scientists. What about data visualization when it comes to design a PowerPoint presentation? This is bad. Okay, this is a real example from, again, a real conference. This is something you don't want to do, okay, for instance, and I will explain you why and what is wrong. But I think everyone can agree that it's not really readable, this slide. Same as this one. This was from one of our PhD students. The data inside may be interesting, but it's not good from a design point of view. So let's see. Normal mistakes are, and especially people working, chemists working in synthesis, they tend to build these big tables and put a lot of numbers inside. So you may listen as you may hear sentences like, as you can see from this table. Well, actually, we cannot really see anything if you just put a table with a lot of numbers. I know that all of us spend a lot of hours in the lab during the PhD and etc. We trust you. You don't have to show all the results of all the experiments you did, okay? Because really it's not understandable. Or maybe you put, and this was the PhD student mistake, you put many plots on the same slide. So in this plot, which I show you our preliminary results, demonstrating that it's not really clear. In your mind, in the speaker mind, it's really clear, but in someone who is just looking at this slide for the first time, it's totally confusing. Plus, as I told you at the beginning, you don't know where your audience is really looking at, okay? So if you're not going into the details of each plot or of everything you put on that slide, simply don't put that on a slide, okay? So to summarize the thing for data visualization, you need to adapt your paper images to your presentation. So it's not good, for instance, to copy and paste from a publication the same exact plot, because if that was done for a publication, not for presenting on a screen. You can use animations to highlight and help the audience following your data analysis, and I'm going to give you examples. And most importantly, if you are not going to describe the plot or everything you put in the slide, leave it out, okay? For instance, this is the same plot without animation and with animation. You maybe want to discuss some, in this case, lipids that are upregulated upon a treatment or upon a disease, and some others that are downregulated upon another treatment or upon another disease. It's exactly the same plot. You do this with PowerPoint. I just used PowerPoint and cut and paste the same plot, but the readability is better, okay, for someone that is listening to you. What about the tables? I don't want to leave the message that we don't have to use tables, no. But for instance, if you want to emphasize a particular result, you can still put all of the numbers, but then use animations or other strategies to highlight numbers or trends. Okay, something like that. It's really helping the audience to follow your story and also to engage them a bit. Okay. Again, avoid copy and paste images from papers. The rule is exactly the same. Less is more. Concerning the infographics are really cool. So if you are lucky enough that your research topic can be adapted through infographics already available, or you may want to design one from scratch, these are really a key to the brain and the heart of your audience. Okay, so I recommend using infographics. Animations, I will be short, because of course they help building your slide content progressively, and this is why we want to use them. I just show you an example with the plots, right? That's perfect. But we also need to avoid the trash, because too many animations are not desirable in a presentation, and trash can have a different shape. And also limit the transitions from one slide to another, especially if you, like in my case, you are you have many slides in your PowerPoint. Okay, this it's tiring for the audience, and at the end you will lose their attention. Structure, this is the last point of what I wanted to touch in this short time. Of course, every topic can be further expanded, but since I wanted to stay in time to engage in the discussion. So we need to tell a story. This is the way we learn everything in our life. Also, science should be told as a story, and by following exactly the same pattern of storytelling. So we want to start broad, we want to get specific, and then we want to end broad again. Also, when you get specific, don't just stay at the same level of specificity, but try to alternate moment when you really get specific into your results, and then you breathe a bit and you try to say the same thing with other words, about jargon, and in general, think that someone who is listening to you, or maybe most expert than you, and in that case, he will already know the specificity, okay? So you need to just engage him in a maybe different way, but most probably the audience you will face, especially if you are a PhD student or a scientist in general, knows way less than you about the topic. So you really need to be generic and try to catch his or her attention, okay? About the structure, this is my tip. One slide, one image, okay? Why you want to use an image instead of text? Guess, there is this girl whose father remarried with a mad woman who has 2 evil daughters that treat the girl as a servant. The girl finds her personal revenge by meeting by chance a feticist prince and marrying him. It was way faster. If I just put that image, you would have understood that that was just about the Cinderella story, okay? So one slide, one image, and these are some examples I took from my presentation. The bigger the image, the most impact you will have, okay? In this case, I was talking about skin biomarkers. In this case, I was talking about wearables, big images. One slide, one image, as well as one slide, one key message, okay? So you will be sure that your audience is really on your same path. Again, less is more, and this is most the 4th time we will see this. In general, we probably were told, any one of us, or at least I was told, one slide, 1 minute, at least once in my life. This is bullshit. Or at least, let me explain. It was true when the slides were physical slides. I don't know the term in English, but when our professor had to really design the slide and put in the projector. Now it's digital, so use as many as you need. They are free, and so forget about one slide, 1 minute, please. And the last point, which is really important to me, be creative. Because if you surprise, if you present something that is expected, you will present in an unexpected way, you will really put a seed, and people will recognize you on, and maybe this is the point of every conference, contact you after your presentation, right? So for instance, this is a slide I used in a conference to introduce the omics family, okay? Or this is a way I used to end up a presentation. These things break a bit the serious mood we may establish in some scientific conference. They are usually appreciated by the audience. And then this is an ingredient X, but I will stop here because then we enter in a new, if you want, topic for another workshop maybe, which is public speaking capabilities. But I told you all of this, and now I have to tell you that actually only the 7% of every talk that we give is about what we say. and also how the presentation look like. The rest, it's all about how we say and how we look like while we're saying that. So there are a few tips also about scientific and public speaking, but again, this is not the focus of this talk. So I just wanted to use these minutes to give you some hints that hopefully you can apply even right now. If you are happy, you can even share with me your presentation, and you can ask me, Sara, what do you think about this? Is how it was. Then after your tips, or after I downloaded a template, this is how it looks like. Do you like, you don't like? And I'll be happy to answer. This is my email, and then you can find me basically on every social media. And thanks again for inviting me.
Hi, thank you, Sara, for your talk. It was really, really nice. Very, very good tips. So now I'm afraid we've just got like 15 minutes left for discussion. So we've got some comments that are general for like everyone and all the speakers. In general, everything is praise and good words to all of you. So congratulations. We've got Anna saying that she's very happy to finally meet Jess Wade. She's also helping translating some of these entries into Catalan for the Catalan Wikipedia. She wonders if, Jess, you've organized any like Wikipedia marathon. I'm sure you have, but I guess we'll redirect that to your Twitter. We've got some comments from Ursula saying, thank you, Laia, very complex work to do outreach with kids, lovely speech, Laura. Then we've got comments from Aurora recommending another very interesting book called Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez, about the bias in a world designed by men. And then also she gave some tips for designing presentations for like colorblind people. So if they're in the chat, so if you want to check those out, those may be also very helpful. I've got a couple of questions directed to like one of the speakers in particular, and then one that is more like generic about science communication and outreach. So my plan is I'll go to each of you with the questions, and then maybe I'll give you 2-3 minutes each to answer the more general question, and then we can close with that. So first I'm gonna go to Laia. I cannot see her, but I hope she's still connected here. Is she? Okay, cannot see her online, so I'm gonna go to Jess first. From Anna, she mentioned Wikipedia marathons. Is that something that you've organized, participated in to like raise the profile of women and other underrepresented communities on Wikipedia?
Yeah, we've done a bunch of Wikipedia editathons where a group of people come together and collectively edit around a topic. They're really, really good to have at conferences, so scientific conferences. It lets people who are all passionate about something write and create content that's really meaningful, and it lets you interact and network before the conference even begins. So we've done them at a few different scientific conferences. We actually just did a virtual one a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of the ACS conference. So we had an all-day online virtual Wikipedia editathon for that. But if anyone's interested in hosting them or anything like that, just reach out, because they're so easy to run and the training's really fun and everyone just has a really great time doing it. And it's actually really good, coming back to the points of the other eminent speakers, for practicing your science writing, for learning how to write in a neutral way about a topic that you're not expert in. And you've got to be kind of compelling and interesting, and also convince the other editors that it should stay online. So yeah, Wikipedia editathons and marathons are totally my bag.
Thanks so much, Jess. We've got a question for Laia, but she just texted me that apparently internet in her little village in the middle of nowhere is not very good. So she dropped out from this call. She apologizes to everyone. The question was about programs for disadvantaged students or minorities in STEAM, so STEM and arts. I used to work at ICIQ, and I think they do have a program for underrepresented communities. They go to some very specific neighborhoods and they do outreach there too. But there was a very long question to Laia as well about the challenges of organizing outreach activities. So my tip here is go to Twitter and reach out to Laia directly. We're lucky enough that all our speakers today are very active on Twitter. So just go ahead and find them and reach out. I'm sure that also Laia shared her email address. So just drop her an email and I'm sure she'll give all the answers there. Then we've got a couple of questions for Sara about design and presentations. They both come from the same person, someone called Dalia. And they're wondering if you'd be able to share some ideal presentations that you find inspiring, for example, or maybe if you have any other links or references to platforms with tips to design presentations on how to design presentations, any books or websites that you normally check.
Sure. Well, sorry, actually the last slide of my presentation was about the source where I got inspired from. So maybe while answering, I can share again so you can at least make a screenshot. And concerning presentations, I'm really open to discuss this kind of face-to-face, because I think it's really important that I can show you my presentation which I try to improve every time, that hopefully embed all of these tips and tools. But what I think it's more constructive is that we together look at one of your presentation and we try to modify that one. I think that this is more impactful, and I can assure you that normally I do this in workshops, so we have more time. I can assure you that even in a short amount of time, you will see your presentation improving by applying a few of these tips. So I'm open. If she or he can write to me, we will set a Skype session and work together. I think it's better.
Yeah, so let's insist on that point. All the speakers are very open to interactions or Twitter or email, so just reach out to them. And then now I'm gonna give you each like a couple minutes to respond to Lorena's more like general question on science communication and particularly on communicating chemistry. So she wonders on like, what do you think needs to be done to kind of change the negative aspect that chemistry has in the public perception? You know, we talked about Beirut and the explosion, and it seems, you know, chemistry always does something bad, but actually it's very good, and you know, it may be the solution to things like the current pandemic. So I'm gonna start with Laura, and then I'll go to Jess and Sara. So what do you think, Laura?
So I think one of the most important things to remember is that it's not the science, it's not the molecules that are good or bad, it's how we use them, it's the people involved. So the first thing I would say is just make sure that you are always behaving and being ethical in how you do your science. I would hope that everyone is, but I think also if you're ever challenged or how we describe chemistry is a way of solving problems as well. You know, it's a way of coming up with fertilizers and pesticides, and there are good and bad things about that, and we can acknowledge that, but they have done an awful lot of good. I certainly would much prefer to be living now in the modern age in a pandemic than say 100 years ago during the Spanish flu pandemic. I shouldn't call it the Spanish flu pandemic, but the flu pandemic of the early 1900s. We are having a much better life of it now, and that is in part because of science and technology. I don't think we should shy away from acknowledging when it's bad, and I think we should own that, but I think we should also show what science and what chemistry in particular can do.
Thank you, Laura. So Jess, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Laura's point's really important. I've been thinking about it a lot, especially how the public perceive plastic now, because it's something that when plastic first came about, everyone like went nuts and was so excited, and you know, plastic bags were like the trendy thing to have, and everyone was super into it. And then, you know, the popularity has waned as we've started to take it for granted and use it for these really boring applications where we are using too much and creating too much. And then you have something like the coronavirus pandemic, and suddenly we need plastic, right? We need these single-use masks. We need these plastic gloves. The National Health Service in the UK is using as much of the plastic gloves that they have to use to treat coronavirus patients, as many as they usually use in a year, they're using in a month. So the amount we're getting through at the moment is staggering. And I think finding a way that we as chemists and physicists and material scientists talk about materials and how, of course, we need to use these materials, but we're also working on more sustainable options, more ways that we can recycle the materials, more cleaner, you know, greener chemistry. I think choosing that narrative is really, really important. It's also something that completely motivates and excites young people. I did a kind of Zoom hangout session with some, I think they're all about 8 years old. And I was like, here's a circularly polarized light emitting diode. No, I tailored it. But all they wanted to talk about was plastic. All they were worried about was the amount of plastic they were seeing around them. And our job has to be, you know, we have the science to be able to change this and make it better. But for now, this is the best we can do. And the safest and healthiest thing to do is to wear the mask and to wear the gloves. So you've got this really interesting dialogue that has to happen. But you know, that's why these kind of workshops are important, because we all have to learn how to have those conversations with different audiences.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jess. So we're gonna move to Sara. What do you think about all this? And
yes, I fully agree with everything that has been said so far, so I don't want really to repeat myself. Also considering that actually, Fernando, this kind of chemophobia has been discussed a lot. I just want to point out to us as chemists or a scientist colleague that actually there is a nice document from the RSC, the Royal Society of Chemistry, that tells us that actually we tend to think that people hate chemistry, but it's not true. We are biased from the inside world against this prejudice, which is really not as strong as expected. And this should be the boosting for us, because what is for sure true is that we need to communicate more in a professional way. So people like science journalists, or even young people, young researchers that decide to work in science communication, they should be not scared about, no? Because sometimes you are pointed out as, okay, you want to do science communication, you are a lazy scientist. No, there is need of professional scientific communicators, and in general there is need to communicate more.
yeah, thank you, Sara. Actually, someone else pointed that out in the comments as well. The RSC text on public attitudes to chemistry is very interesting, and it's quite easy to find, and it points out that chemistry is not as bad as we think it is. People actually like it quite a lot. So thank you for bringing that up. We should learn how to communicate better and how to share this knowledge with the world. I think the time is up. I want to thank you all once again, Sara, Jess, Laura, and Laia. It was lovely to have you here. We all learned a lot from you. And then from the eYCN, the European Young Chemists Network, we want to thank all the attendees for coming. I think this is going to be on our YouTube channel and then advertised on all our social media. So just try to find us there. It's eYCN.eu. And then also Professor Kemchicken is very happy that you could all join and be here with us. You can also follow her on Twitter at Kemchicken, and she shares a lot of interesting chemistry stuff for everybody. So thank you everyone for joining, and hope to see you again very soon.